Welcome to Film Forum Presents, a podcast featuring special live events recorded at our theater in downtown Manhattan, along with newly recorded interviews, conversations, and intros. In this episode, Film Forum presents a recent discussion around the new documentary, 1,000 Cuts, about the ongoing fight for democracy and the free press in the Philippines. Filmmaker Ramona Diaz and the film's subject, journalist Maria Ressa, spoke with Christiane Amanpour of CNN and PBS. But first, in a new recurring segment called Meet the Staff, we invite you to get to know some of the folks who are hard at work every day to help sustain Film Forum's operations during our temporary closure and prepare for our eventual reopening. Today, please meet Film Forum's head projectionist, Raymond.
Hi, my name is Raymond, head of projection, Film Forum. I've worked at Film Forum for as long as I could remember, 14 years I guess, and still counting. Much of my day is spent in the booth, 12 hours a day, sometimes 18, depending on the day's schedule. Film Forum has become home away from home. That since the pandemic shut down, part of me has been found wanting. Looking to fill the void I took to learning to play the keyboard. I'm still in the process of mastering some of the keys though. That in the absence of Steve Turner, our pianist, I can step in at a short notice when we had to show silent features. The most satisfying moment for me at Film Forum, however, is seeing patrons still seated in their seats long after the credits has rolled. Sometimes their discussions spill over into the lobby. That whenever I have to start a show, I have a habit of peeping my head through the pop glass before starting to see those in attendance. It brings joy to my heart to see families, friends, couples, and sometimes just individuals glued to their seats with popcorn in one hand and the monthly calendar of upcoming events in the other, as they patiently waited, sometimes for hours, before the start of a show or continuation with a show which has perhaps dislodged itself from the projectors. Digital cinema has been a lifesaver. Film Forum is a community on its own and a family gathering. Friends visit, schools attend, and individuals have a place to be themselves. The more reason I love it for its diversity. I actually missed my daily double cappuccino from the concession desk. I can't wait to go back to work.
Thanks, Raymond. Up next, a conversation with 1,000 Cuts filmmaker Ramona Diaz and its subject, the Filipino-American investigative journalist Maria Ressa. The film follows Ressa, whose fearless critiques of the Philippines' autocratic president Rodrigo Duterte via her popular news site Rappler recently resulted in an alleged cyber libel conviction punishable by up to 6 years in prison. 1,000 Cuts is currently available for home viewing in our virtual cinema at www.filmforum.org. All rental fees support Film Forum. The discussion was moderated by journalist and host of shows on PBS and CNN, Christiane Amanpour. Please enjoy their discussion.
Okay, so I think we're live now. And I guess I want to welcome everybody who's linked in and watching on this Zoom, but particularly I want to welcome Maria Ressa and Ramona Diaz, who of course are the creative force behind this film that we're going to be talking about, 1,000 Cuts. So if you don't mind me just doing a quick little introduction, I'm sure most of you know exactly who they are, otherwise you would not have signed up. But let me start with Maria, who's a former colleague of mine at CNN, Philippine bureau chief for CNN for a long, long time. After nearly 35 years, she co-founded Rappler, top digital-only news site that's leading the fight for press freedom in the Philippines. And of course, Maria is the executive editor and CEO. And as such, she has been in the eye of the storm. It's probably very hard to imagine that you could try to do free and fair, independent, objective journalism in today's Philippines. So it's very tough. Everybody knows her wrangles with the law, rather, how she's come run afoul of the current authoritarian Duterte government. She has been named Time Magazine's 2018 Person of the Year among its 100 most influential people in 2019. And you are also one of Time's most influential women of the century. And this conversation and this film honestly could not come at a better time. Let me introduce Ramona, who is the filmmaker, award-winning Asian American filmmaker whose films have been screened at Sundance, at all sorts of festivals all over the world. She's had other feature-length films, Imelda, The Learning, Don't Stop Believing, and many, many others. And she has received all sorts of awards, Peabody's and others. So look, we know how well decorated and what great journalists and filmmakers we're talking to. So Maria and Ramona, let me just start by asking you, we'll talk for about 20 minutes and then we'll open it up to some of the audience questions, and I've received a lot of them. Okay, Maria, 1,000 Cuts. Give us what this film is about and a little bit of your current legal, professional, personal situation.
My Lord. So 1,000 Cuts actually came from terrorism. That was the whole thing behind it. That was the strategy of Al Qaeda at a certain point, was that to run after the West 1,000 cuts at a time. Well, this is exactly what's happening to democracy. And for us in Rappler, it's been 4 years. Bottom up social media attacks, and then the weaponization of the law after that, right? So 1,000 cuts have been the 1,000 little cuts, the abuses of power, the attacks on media, all of our rights getting pushed back without us realizing it, to the point that democracy is now dying. In 2018, I had 11 cases and investigations filed against me. I saw you in London, Christiane. It's really good to see you, and Ramona. It's been a crazy time. So 1,000 Cuts, I hope, is, as we are trying to recover from this, that we have to find 1,000 ways to strengthen our democracy.
Well, I mean, listen, you're pushing a massive hill, a massive boulder uphill. It's Sisyphean. Ramona, I want to ask you, what drew you to this project? And it's quite, I mean, for Maria, obviously, in the Philippines, it's quite dangerous. I don't know whether for you, you may be in the United States, it has that same level of risk.
Initially what drew me was a drug war, right? I wanted to make a film, just this nebulous idea to make a film about the drug war. But when I got to the Philippines in late 2017, 2018, a lot of people were already doing the drug war. So I had to look around, and I honed in on Maria, because not only was she talking about the drug war, she was also talking about disinformation, right? So she was connecting it to the drug war, impunity, and the weaponization of social media. I mean, Maria has been talking about algorithms and Facebook and fake news and how that erodes democracy since 2016, when very few people were talking about it. So I thought that's really what attracted me. And the dangers were, we filmed with her when she was arrested, right? That 2 times she was arrested within 5 weeks of each other, and she was really in the crosshairs of the administration. And the dangers are the dangers, right? You just don't really think about it or not, you won't move. So that's what I'm most interested. I was most interested in.
Do you both feel or not that it's obviously not just a Philippine issue? It's now sadly all over the world. The dangers towards journalism, whether it's verbal, whether it's aspersions against whether we tell the truth or not. The bottom line is, and it is mostly men, strong men who do not want the truth told. So they call it fake news or lies. That's just a code for, I don't like what you're saying. Do you feel that is there enough global solidarity to keep you going, Maria, through your court case, your legal battle, and to keep this enterprise up and running?
I mean, so definitely it is global. And I think we've been journalists for a while, but never have we lived at a time when information is power. And I think the biggest shift, and the reason why it's global, is these things didn't start in the Philippines. These decisions were made in Silicon Valley. And for the first time globally, we are all connected. You're talking about, just on Facebook properties, 3.2 billion different accounts, right? So, something that happens in Baltimore, where Ramona is, or in London, or in Manila, it's instantaneously spreads. So this is, I think, the very first part of how democracy died was, and I will say it's died, it's dying, and in my country dead, because a lie now spreads faster than facts. A lie told a million times. So the same problem that we're having, you are having. A month after President Duterte was elected, Brexit happened, the dominoes fell in 2016, right? But these were decisions that were made in Silicon Valley first, 2014, 2015, instant articles. We all went on Facebook, news organizations went in. So I think that's the first step. And then the second step is, are people aware of it? Is there a global? Absolutely, people aware of it. But we don't have power to actually do that much as long as facts are debatable. I have no idea how the United States is going to have elections when the people who are making choices for have no facts, or have different facts, right? So this is a global problem, and we can't solve our problems in the Philippines unless we can have shared facts. And it does give greater power to digital authoritarians.
Since you've been doing this film, Ramona, and obviously Maria has, firsthand information and knowledge and experience with the actual journalism part of it, and, the accountability part of it. When you as a filmmaker decided to do this, just expand on what Maria is saying. What are some of the stories that are algorithmically, reproduced, exponentially reproduced through the digital platforms, social media, that caused you to worry, if you have some of those examples?
Oh, that caused me to. I mean, there are so many false stories that are seeded on social media, right? I mean, while we were filming Maria, certainly she was a victim of that constantly, right? I mean, there's stories where she's not, the Rappler is foreign owned. That's very big, right? And so foreign owned and to Duterte, he puts that out as narrative. Foreign owned is like a attack on sovereignty, right? He connects that. That Maria is Indonesian when she's not. But a lot of people will believe this, right? I mean, just her cases alone, I think, are, if you're accused of sedition, that's so easy to wrap your head around, right? But her cases are anti-dummy, tax evasion, cyber libel, things that are not really easily explainable. So on social media, it's like, wait, did she not pay her taxes? Or so it seeds this doubt, right? So you doubt what you first believe. It's gaslighting.
I mean, the examples you raise have been used by authoritarians, by leaders, by whoever wants to get you since time immemorial. Tax, it's a foreign plot, it's a conspiracy, it's all of that kind of stuff. But as you say, now it's exponentially reproduced. But also, Maria, I mean, one of the things that I can't even wrap my head around is that in the Philippines, if I'm not mistaken, news equals Facebook. In other words, people don't necessarily get their news and information from anywhere other than these social media platforms. Is that correct?
100% of Filipinos on the internet are on Facebook. Facebook is our internet. And then for the 5th year running, and this is according to We Are Social and Hootsuite, Filipinos spend the most time on social media globally, fifth year in a row.
Yep.
So yes, it is essentially our information ecosystem.
I wonder what you both think. I mean, you know that the social media giants, the big tech giants, for a long, long time have simply refused to take on the mantle of being publishers or being accountable, rather, in a journalistic kind of way. They just say, no, we're platform and we're here for free speech, or we're here to connect people, or whatever it is. But we do not have the responsibilities that, a CNN or PBS or ABC or whoever it might be, newspapers, radio stations, TV, journalists have responsibilities when it comes to disseminating information, which social media claims not to have and refuses to accept. They just were hauled in front of Congress, obviously virtually, but it was the first time. Do you have any hope that as a start for your case, that might have some kind of beneficial trickle-down effect?
Strangely, the silver lining here is actually, and this is hard to say, it's COVID, because at a time when lies kill, the social media platforms started taking down content, started labeling leaders' tweets and posts, started taking down the posts, right? Things that you've never seen before with political disinformation, they're doing with health, but they should have done this much earlier. So when they take down content, they're definitely publishers, right? We've lost news organizations have lost our gatekeeping powers a long time ago. That went to tech. Tech abdicated responsibility and refused to protect the public sphere. And the way it's designed, with polarity built in, with the fact that lies, more salacious content laced with anger and hate spread faster and further, this brought about this kind of not just the rise of authoritarians around the world, but also gave them greater power. It's now part of the dictator's playbook. So will things get better? I thought these hearings that just happened were the best ones we've had so far because they had so much research backing it, and we saw the giants jostle. But there's a lot more that needs to happen, and it needs. And right now, they're really the only ones that have the power to do it. If you wait for regulation, it's going to be too late for people like us. And here's the other part, Christiane. It's not as if it hasn't been proven. In Myanmar, the United States, Facebook's own research, as well as the UN, have proven that the social media platforms have been part of genocide. And yet no one has been held accountable, and the same conditions. It's minor changes, but the same conditions are still in place. Some things
you can talk about India, you can talk about many. And by the way, Maria, when you talk about authoritarians and dictators, let's face it, this is happening in democracies and in illiberal democracies. I mean, there's a whole, gradation along this spectrum from democracy to dictatorship. And unfortunately, it's being used all over the place. There's the way to use the tech, the attacks against journalists. Ramona, I just wonder whether you have tried to get the big four or any of them to respond to you, and whether that's part two of your or a follow-up to this documentary, because I think that is something that would be massively, massively interesting.
Well, now that you mention it, maybe, but no, I haven't tried to get in touch with them. But I was also going to say, that we can no longer be passive, consumers of the news, right? I mean, you really have to question everything you read, right? And look at the sources. And personally, I still look at brand media, the legacy media. Okay. Yeah. I mean, there's some things I like, the Washington Post, and some things that I just still believe. If I haven't heard of this source, go look at it, follow its source. We can't just accept everything now that we know this is happening, right? We can't also wait for tech media to do something. So we have to do it.
You raise a very important point, and I don't know whether Maria would agree with me as a practicing journalist, but I have said now, in response to questions about how can people know the truth, and I say, that really hurts me, because many of us have labored long and hard in established brand name journalistic organizations. And it's now up to you. It's not just up to us. We're doing the job. We're giving you the truth. We're fact checking. We are being objective, not neutral, by the way, but objective, which means truthful, by covering all sides and contextualizing and figuring out where the truth is. And we're doing it. And so are countless other very, very, very reputable and long-term organizations. So in my opinion, it is right to challenge the reader, viewer, listener, user. Absolutely. If they want the truth, they know where they can find it. Absolutely, 100%. If they want to be titillated, if they want to have their, social media itch scratch, fine, do it. But don't let that just be the only outlet and the only sort of voice of authority. It has to be real brand names. What do you think, Maria?
I think the big difference, I think, between tech and journalists is that journalists, news organizations, we knew we needed to protect the public sphere. We have standards and ethics, and we kept a light footprint, right? I mean, in the sense that you're not actively manipulating. But tech platforms are actually designed to manipulate. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things, we're designing a new tech platform, and I'm just looking at it thinking news organizations are kind of not so smart because we outsource the sharing part to tech, when in the end, that's one of the basic human needs, is to share. So tech looked at human beings as whole, the way we think, like Pavlov's dogs, and news organizations, journalists wanted to give information. So this is how our world is turned upside down. Our delivery platforms are manipulating.
You know, it was interesting. I just listened, just not because I was talking to you this afternoon, but just I had just time to listen to an article in the New Yorker, which is how best can journalism serve democracy. And you may have read it. It was an article, but I listened to it on audio, and it went back 75 years when Henry Luce, who was the founder of Time, obviously, etc., gathered a group of people who actually weren't journalists. Some of them philosophers, thinkers, others, some even, religious figures. They came up with sort of some very, very important polls and guidelines, which we used to take for granted. Things like, you have to go tell the truth. You have to get the widest array of views, but you can't necessarily equate, he said, she said. Journalism has to have context. Journalism has to, serve the widest range of people. Unfortunately, what seems to have happened is that now everybody is politicized, everybody's in their own silos, and everybody feels that, they have a monopoly on the truth. And this thing 75 years ago said that if a society cannot find some place where there are facts, and if part of society relies on one set of facts and another part of society relies on alternative facts, it's a recipe for disaster. So I wonder, before we get to some of these questions, whether you see any solutions in our world today. And you said, we can't wait for regulation. Sometimes I think we have to have regulation. But Maria and then Ramona, do you see any solutions out of the thesis that you've brought with 1,000 Cuts?
So I've been living this for 4 years and thought about it a lot. Short, medium, and short and medium term. The short term, really, the tech platforms have got to move. They can't be in denial. They won't solve the problem until they own it. They created it. They have to actually deal with it. And this is the whole data, privacy, artificial intelligence. We can have a whole day's worth of stuff. The second, the medium term, is regulation. And what do we do with that? Certain things, certainly switch it from having the user be responsible to tell the platforms that something's wrong with their platform. It should be the other way around, right? Who gets to experiment on a mass scale? Do you try a drug out before you know whether it's harmful or not? This shouldn't be done anymore. And so these are some of the, I think in the medium term, data privacy, it would be data portability, social network portability. We need to shift the balance of power over to give users more, because we certainly see all the incentives, i.e. power and money, on the other side. It's not with the users.
And Ramona, of course, this part of it started before the explosion of social media. You have certain cable outlets, certain media outlets that operate as, arms of a political party or a particular point of view. Obviously, social media has raised the stakes unimaginably in this technological way. It's a thing that's been plaguing our societies for quite a long time. And to be honest with you, some might say ever since the FCC dropped its, fairness doctrine, it's equal, what is it called? Equal time and all the rest of it. What do you think about that?
You can only, what I do now is I call it out. when I write, you call it out. Before, I didn't want to engage in social media, but because it's exponential, right?
Yeah.
You call it out. Even if people take down some of the, fake news, forget it. It's already out there. You can never take it back. So now I've come to calling it out and not be silent. Really, you can only do what you can do, right? I mean, what Maria said, that's great. Those are systems wide. You have to change the system. You have to change the engineering of the platforms. That's got to happen, right? Because otherwise you're targeted. You're micro-targeted and you don't even know it. I think, I used to think that I wasn't a victim, but everyone's a victim, and you really have to stop and call out the lies that you see wherever, in social or in actual like, interactions with people.
Yeah, and we are in a political moment actually, around from certainly from the United States through Europe, and look at now Lebanon. I mean, there's a moment of protest, of a demand for accountability by citizens, and it's a very, very powerful moment, the likes of which we haven't seen for a long time. Maybe this will be another issue that people demand accountability for. Let's get to some of these questions. Ramona first. This is from Robert in North Carolina. It's cool. I was going to ask you this question. How do you find your film subjects? Specifically, how do you convince Maria, Mocha, and the Senate candidate to participate in the film? Bato.
I'm drawn to films in certain ways, right? Characters, story, or sometimes theme. So in this case, I was drawn to the story through the drug war. And then, like I said earlier, the drug war wasn't happening. But basically, I moved to the Philippines. I make films about the Filipino and Filipino-American experience. I moved to the Philippines because I do deep dives. And I basically, I observe who are like the compelling characters, because my medium is film. So basically, I cast, right? I mean, you don't usually talk about casting in documentaries, but we do, because, the person that you're gazing at has to, what you call hold the light, right? It's like they have to hold the gaze of the lens. And I look around and see who's really interesting, and who's interesting, and that they're in the middle of the drama, right? So Senator De La Rosa was the implementer of the drug war. He's a very, very close ally of the president. Mocha Uson was a blogger, singer, entertainer, blogger, influencer turned politician, and was very indebted to the president was indebted to her support. And I thought they were fascinating characters. See, I don't approach them either as like anti-heroes, because I don't think, no one is an anti-hero in their own personal history. So I want to know what their why they are heroes in their narrative, and I'm very transparent with them, and I think that's why they say yes. They also know my previous work. I've done a lot of work that's played in the Philippines. So and I approach them and I say, this is what I want to do. Tell me your story, and they think about it, and they eventually come around. I never take no for an. I always just keep going back until they see it. Like, they come around, and then of course access is given little at a time until you get to some kind of trust. And Maria, of course, oh my God, Maria. I mean, she can tell you herself why she said yes, but of course, she was getting arrested. She was talking about this information very articulately and very clearly, and she could unwrap it for people who had no idea what it was, right? And that I needed. And things were happening to her in real time. You could not, I mean, it's like catching lightning in a bottle with Maria. So,
well, it's seriously compelling. Maria, let me ask you, this comes from Tim Azcuno. I think it's coming from the Philippines. How does a nation balance the national security interest of the state with the civil rights and freedom of expression of its citizens?
We've dealt with this our entire careers, haven't we, Christiane? I mean,
yes.
So I don't think they're mutually exclusive. In fact, in order to have a robust and democratic society, you have to have free speech. Where we've dealt with it is intelligence documents. So I would do things differently from someone who would do a dump of all the documents that you get.
I agree with you.
Because people are, people have are put their lives at risk when you do that. You have to go through the documents. And then when we do put it out, and we've done this when we were with CNN, there's a team that goes through it. We make sure that we serve the public at the same time, that we're not stepping on something that is going on that we don't know about. I guess you have to be humble enough to realize that there's a ton you don't know, and you place it in context.
Yeah, I think that's such an important thing. Place it in context. Have your the bar of accountability. And I think you're absolutely right. I think what people really need to know, particularly people who live in authoritarian or under authoritarian governments, that it really is only a strong and free press that reports without fear nor favor, that is independent, that is uncorruptible, that underpins the rights of citizens, and indeed manages to make sure that it happens within the democratic process and within the, the rules and the boundaries, some of which have to happen. I mean, anytime I covered a war, we took as granted that if we were with a certain unit, we did not report certain things in real time. We could do it afterwards, but you didn't report certain things in real time because that might compromise an actual operation. And just as a self-interest, if you're actually with that unit, you certainly don't want to compromise your security because it would affect you as well. So I think it's a lot of it is common sense. But I think that, Maria, you've really dedicated your life to this. I hope I have as well. But I think there's nothing more cleansing and more restorative than strong, truthful, objective journalism. And I've always said the difference between, truth and lies is the difference between democracy and dictatorship. And you guys are really, walking the walk. Let me ask you both, maybe. I'll ask you first, Ramona. This is Emily G. from Portland, Oregon, and we know what's going on in Portland. They've been incredibly brave. Their moms, dads, civilians out there, protesting racial injustice and standing very firm when an unconstitutional deployment of the military took place against them in the United States. So, with claims of fake news and the proliferation of social media disinformation campaigns, how can the average person become a better consumer of media news? We touched on it a little bit, but a little bit more. How can the average person, you give it a little bit of a roadmap for Emily G. in Portland?
Oh my gosh, first of all, don't share immediately. Read the article, right? Because sometimes the headline has nothing to do with the article. And you're like, oh, this is really clickbait. And don't share it, right? I mean, it's really just really simple things. Stop, move away from your computer. And that urge to constantly share, I think, is insidious and really scary. So really simple things. Just stop, read it, think about it for a second, because in the next moment, you may not want to share it, right? So take a beat.
Take a beat. And as you said, let's say it again, be responsible. All of you consumers out there, no matter what your platform is, go to the brands that are trustworthy and have decades and decades and decades of proven track record. Just do it.
Yeah, you have to be proactive. You can't be passive. You can't be a passive consumer.
Can I add to that one, the whole thing of if something makes you angry or makes you hate someone, step back, because most likely you are being manipulated in that sense, because that is the goal of these influence operations. We talked earlier, Christiane, about filter bubbles. Well, actually, something you said triggered this whole thing. The design of the platforms is meant to create an us against them. It pulls you away and pushes you to the extreme. So if you, again, what will spread fastest is anger and hate.
Yeah.
And the target, so someone like me who is being targeted, the end goal of these influence operations is to dehumanize the journalist. And when that happens, then think back. I mean, we've seen this in history. We've seen this in Germany, in Nazi Germany, the way they dealt with the Jews. That was how. So anyway, sorry, the role of emotions. If you're feeling hatred, if you are feeling like you want to punch the wall, go punch the wall, don't share it. Back and think.
In my experience, I saw it in a less exponential way because we didn't have social media at the time, but in Bosnia, there was a lot of fake news, a lot of hatred, a lot of division sown by the media, by the state media of each side, or mostly the aggressor side. And then at a terrible, terrible consequence, over one small piece of technology, that's called a radio, in Rwanda. Radio Mille Collines just kept on and on and on during the mid-90s, just spewing hatred. Not just that, but encouraging and pushing people to go and kill their neighbors based simply on a different tribe, a different ethnicity. And 100,000, 800,000 to 1 million people were killed in 3 months. So believe us when we say this has real life and death consequences. To the point of your safety, Rebecca Lowe in Chicago, Illinois. I'm very concerned about the political direction the Philippines is going in. I also feel worried for Maria Ressa and anyone who speaks out against Duterte. As a Filipino American, I also feel helpless. What are some ways international supporters can help defend Filipino press freedom and human rights?
Thank you for asking. I think the first is, there's so many. you have family and friends. It feels like people can't talk to each other anymore. It feels like facts are debatable because we have been pushed aside, right? So talk to your family and friends. We need to somehow come back to a public sphere where we can actually have discussions that are civil. We used to do this. That's the first. I think the second is hold Silicon Valley to account. Uh, we can't do our work until the lies stop. And at a time when lies kill, it's really important to make sure that the lies stop. And then the third, I would think, is journalists are under attack in the Philippines. ABS-CBN, the largest broadcaster, was shut down in a time of pandemic. It is the 21st week of an extreme lockdown. We are in home quarantine. The only connection we have to the world is online, right? So I think part of that is stand up for democracy. Make sure that you don't give up your rights. You tell your family and friends not to give up their rights because that's what these times are demanding from us. We'll hold the line. We'll continue doing the stories. And then finally, the last one. Sorry, that's a large, long list. But the last one is we've survived 4 years because of the kindness of strangers. Our legal fees are average about $40,000 a month. That's insane for a news group like us. And we've done that because of the crowdsourcing that our community has done, both here and around the world. Thank you to everybody who has helped us. All you have to do is Rappler crowdfunding. You'll find it. Thank you.
You know, Maria, you make a very, very important point there. Just been watching a 3-part documentary about the Murdochs on television here in the UK. And they and, other powerful entities have always tried to quiet the messenger, to silence the messenger by punitive court cases that they know they may not win, but they're going to put the other person out of business, and it's going to be a chilling effect. People aren't going to want to take them on because it's going to cost so much. And one, activist in this documentary said that because he was incredibly well off, he had the resources, he had been impugned, he had taken, certain newspaper to court, and I believe had won. He was financing other people's court cases because money talks, and you're absolutely right, Maria. Any support that you can get to continue defending yourself is really important. This is for you, Ramona, from Carly B in Washington. What drew you to filmmaking? We've asked you how you choose your subjects, but before you even get to there, what drew you to filmmaking? What's your journey?
My journey was photography first, and really visuals. But more than that, I love the process of filmmaking. Of course, story, absolutely, But to me, the process of making a film. When I was younger, much younger, and I saw a film by Francois Truffaut, Day for Night. And it was about a film. It was a film about making a film. And it was about community and collaboration and this group of people who come together to make one thing. And I thought, wow, that was such a romantic view of making art, right, with other people. And that's what really drew me. And then, of course, the stories. And I always say I make documentaries. I make very immersive documentaries. I spent time, you can ask Maria, I spent like a year and a half with her. Yeah. But just to experience, like with Maria, I experienced what a journalist was like, right? I've made a film about Imelda Marcos. I wanted to feel what that was like. I made a film about rock stars. What is that like? I would never otherwise have that experience. And it's that experience that I try to give the audience, right?
Because you're kind of the eyes and ears for the audience in your field, and journalists are the eyes and ears also for people who can't go to all these crazy places in the world that we do and tell the story. So I'm going to ask this next question. Well, it's not my question, but it comes from Sarah in Austin, Texas. I'm going to start with you, actually, Ramona, and then ask Maria. So the word objective is often used to describe journalism and documentary filmmaking. Do you believe it's possible for journalists and filmmakers to be objective? If not objective, what standards should we be striving for? Now, I think there may be a difference between filmmakers and journalists when it comes to this word. Maybe I'm wrong, but what does objectivity mean for you as a filmmaker, Ramona?
Well, first of all, objectivity is never my intention. It's not my intent. Even if I wanted it to be objective, I work in film. Film is a medium that resists objectivity, right? Because what the audience is really getting is a mediated experience. And I am mediating that experience for them. So that can never be objective. I'm using all the tools of cinema, like the camera, the music, so I'm as a director, I am directing your gaze and your senses. That's what I do as a director. So that can't ever be objective. All I ask is the audience to trust me, right? I am guiding their journey through this experience. But what I promise and my contract with the audience is I will never lie, right? I will never say something, it's nighttime and it's daytime, or take Maria out of context, or she said this when she didn't. That will never happen. Now, do we change and rearrange things for dramatic structure, which is another element of film? Absolutely, we do. But we will not lie to you. That things happen, and they're in context, and we will never say things. We will never put words in people's mouths or take things out of context. So that's my contract with the audience. But objectivity is hard, right? I mean, it is impossible, actually, because I work in the medium of film.
I think you're possibly right in film. I don't believe it's impossible in journalism, but I'd like to hear Maria's take on this, because there's a huge kerfuffle right now. The New York Times, elsewhere. What is objectivity? I think people confuse it with neutrality. What do you think for yourself, Maria?
Let me first quote Christiane Amanpour, who said, "Be truthful, not neutral," because I don't think there is. So like Ramona, I feel like you can't. There is no objectivity, or the old idea of objectivity comes from telling people exactly where you are, like the context of what is happening. So I even when I was with CNN, I used to say, look, it's like when I first came in as a reporter in Manila, I was a small, short, I was 5'2". The guy I replaced was 6'2". I don't know if you remember him, right? So even in the way we stood, it was Taylor Henry for a little while. And then I know you reported here a little bit before I did, but it was like those perspectives are different. I'm Asian American. That gives me a different lens. You have a different lens. And we bring all of that to who we are. But just even that, my height, I'm 5'2" versus somebody who's 6'2". That will be a different viewpoint. And I guess the difference there is that we, as a journalist, you're trained to actually tell the context of where you are. And so the word objective, I've always been allergic to that from the very beginning, because it pretends like you don't have a view, and you really do have a view as a reporter. And as a reporter, you build up trust with your audience, at least in the old days before this cheap exponential spread that social media has enabled. And this is also part of the reason trust has been eroded, because of the technology that we're using. Let me not go there. So I think just for this, think about, if we were in a room and we were telling people in London about the room, and depending on where you sit in the room and who you're sitting in front of, you would have different descriptions of the room. Neither one makes it better or worse, but the better one, the best one, puts context, tells you how many people, why are they there in the room, gives you the whys.
So I have a different view. Obviously, I don't have the filmmaker's view because I'm not, but I remember my objectivity being questioned during the Bosnia War. And it was questioned because people didn't want to see the truth. They didn't want to know that there was a definite victim and a definite aggressor, because that meant that our leaders outside would have to do something about it. And it was an aggression based on ethnic cleansing, which eventually was adjudicated in some cases as to be genocide. And I was quite upset. I was like, oh my gosh, people are questioning my objectivity. They're telling me I'm siding with this side and this and that. And I just had this overnight sort of flash of realization, because I do strongly believe, especially now when there's this big debate over objectivity and what journalism should be. I actually do believe that objectivity is our golden rule. But I think people have got it, they don't understand what objectivity is. I think they think it is neutrality. I think they think that it is on the one hand, on the other hand, where it's not. It
Yeah.
is about getting a 360-degree view of the story and
Yeah.
then telling the truth out of that 360 degrees. So you can take it back to genocide in Bosnia, where there was a victim and there was an aggressor, and the world wanted to say they were both equally guilty. We said, no, that's not the case. We were telling the truth. Then, you know, the climate debate, you know, people have got themselves completely in a mess trying to figure out that actually there's 99.9% of science on this side and, you know, 0. whatever percent of deniers on that side. And to equate them is not objective. It's neutral and it's a lie. So I think you can hold the line on objectivity, but make sure people know how to define it. That's my little speech.
I that though, Christiane, because like look at where I stand. Look at where I stand now, right? I have a government that has actually filed cases against me, that has painted me and Rappler as a political opposition when we're not. We're just trying to do our jobs, which is to hold the government to account. The abuses have happened. So how do you deal with that? And we've had to deal with this. And I think American news organizations are having to deal with this now as well, because the facts are debatable. Power is using tremendous power to make the facts debatable.
But that's different. Power is manipulating them, but the facts are not debatable.
The facts are not debatable, but what happens when people begin to think it is? Right. When they don't know what to believe. I think that's the reality we live in now. So, you know, I guess in a battle for facts, journalism is activism. That's the other thing that I've shifted.
And that's a good way to end, frankly, because that's absolutely correct. Maybe, Ramona, why don't you tell us where the film is playing, where it's going to be released, where people can see it? Because one of the questions was here, will we be able to see it in the Philippines? So just tell our audience and anybody who's interested.
So right now we're out in virtual cinemas in the US and Canada. Now and that started August 7th. What is virtual cinema? If you go to the film's website, 1000cuts.film, you will see a list of participating cinemas or theaters. You click on that link, you buy a ticket, like directly from the theater that you want to support, because they're mostly art houses who need our support. You buy a ticket, and then you can watch it in the comfort of your own home. You're given, like, once you trigger it, you're given 48 hours, but you have access to it for 7 days, right? So that's virtual cinema. That's how you can watch it in the US and Canada. So log on to our website. Now, in the Philippines, we will be there in the fall. We'll be there soon. We've actually already done a free release of the film for 24 hours right before Maria's verdict, just to raise the awareness for a verdict. We did it for 24 hours and we got like 233,000 full views in 24 hours. It was pretty incredible.
Maria, just before we end, just tell us exactly where your case stands right now. Today, August 9th, what's the situation?
8 criminal cases. All of these trials are ongoing. And they're roughly in 3 buckets: cyber libel, tax evasion, 5 of them off the same event. And in order to be charged with tax evasion, they had to reclassify our company into a dealer in security. So, you know, lots of legal acrobatics. The last one is securities fraud. Again, similar thing. I guess, look, it's at the end of it. And the question I want to leave with everybody is a question I ask all Filipinos all the time. And I think it spreads to everyone in every democracy around the world. This is one of those moments where we have to actually ask ourselves, what are you willing to sacrifice for the truth? Because you cannot hold power to account without the facts. And without the facts, you can't have truth. Without truth, you can't have trust. Everything falls. So this is it. You know, it's not just the journalists. It's not just us who have to do something. I think everyone in a democracy needs to, because it's destroyed around us. You have to help build it. Is that crazy? I mean, Christiane, I sound like an activist and I'm a journalist, you know?
You just said that your type of journalism is activism. It's activism for the truth. And it's activism for the strength of our democracies. It's activism for our human rights. It's activism for all the issues that we're confronting right now. The global, you know, movement for justice, racial justice, economic justice, the global demand for leadership around this terrible pandemic. All of this, the huge outpouring in Lebanon to finally demand, finally after all these years, an uncorrupt authority that manages to give them public services and not allow, explosives to be sitting there untended for 6 years, waiting for this kind of terrible disaster. It's all over the place. And I think we are the mediums who communicate that to the people. And I think that's what we do. So keep up the good fight. And congratulations, Ramona Diaz, Maria Ressa, well done. It's very brave, it's very good. And I advise you to send a copy to each member of the social media platforms who you'd like to know.
We will.
About this.
Thank you, Christiane, for doing this. Thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Happy Sunday, everybody.
Happy Sunday.
Thank you for listening to Film Forum Presents. Special thanks to PBS Distribution for making this episode possible. If you like what you just heard, please be sure to subscribe to get future episodes and rate and review so that more movie lovers can find us. Film Forum is an independent nonprofit cinema, and our doors have been kept open for nearly 50 years thanks to the invaluable support of our members and donors. Please visit www.filmforum.org for details on membership, as well as information and showtimes for our current programming. See you at the movies.